Welcome back. Good to see you. We are going to be talking about in this episode how to be indestructible, how to be uncancelable. And this was kind of inspired by some things I was thinking about recently, and partially inspired by something that my church is doing, which is a sermon series on Christian culture building. And this has gotten me to think about how churches can build defensible cultures that are protected from outside or inside corruption from outside the church or corruption from inside the church, because you're going to have a lot of different ideas within the church, and you have to have the kind of, and this applies to everything, by the way. I'm going to apply this to your life individually and not just churches, but in a situation where there are many different ideas going on, you want to be sure to know what your distinctives are, or your organization or your family's distinctives, and not let those change, but still be willing to have unity with people who maybe disagree on certain things, certain secondary issues. And that's cool, totally fine. And so when I was thinking about this with the culture, I also was thinking about how can we as families, how can we as individuals create not just in churches a good solid Christian culture, but how do we as individuals create that? Because ultimately creating a Christian culture has to start with us individually. Some people probably lazy people, people who don't like responsibility, they want to try to start at the highest levels without fixing themselves first, without fixing their immediate vicinity first, and skip that and say, I don't need to get my life together. I'm going to go straight to, dealing with the stuff that my church is doing wrong, or I'm going to deal with the stuff that my city is doing wrong, or, they're doing this thing I don't like, and then our lives individually aren't together. Jesus had a very apt quote about taking the log out of your own eye before focusing on the splinter in somebody else's eye. And we have to realize the thing that causes and allows corruption in culture ultimately is sin. All of the other things, you can say different ideological things or various different things are symptoms of the ultimate issue, which is sin. Sin is at the root of the problem. And so if sin is at the root of the problem, and we have significant sin in our own lives, and we're trying to go out and criticize the sin of other people, then we're actually being counterproductive. We're actually participating in exactly the same thing that is the core of the disease that is causing the problem that we are criticizing. So in other words, we have to hate sin, not just that other guy's sin, but we actually have to hate sin if we want to build, first and foremost, a defensible private and family life, just like building a defensible Christian culture. And hating sin means we also have to obviously love God. If we're not loving God properly, then we're not hating sin properly. And so there are a lot of theological things that I could get into, and practical theological things that I think ought to be doing that will seriously help, like family worship, or regularly reading your Bible, and doing Bible studies as a family, or discussions about theology as a family. All those are good things. And so I'm not really going to focus on those things. I want to give more practical, it's all theology, but I really want to give more practical, non-theological advice on how to become indestructible. Things that we can go carry out into our lives and actually start applying today. How does one become uncancelable? How does one become indestructible? How does one become anti-fragile? We live in a world where cancel culture is rampant on both sides of the political spectrum, quote unquote. I think cancel culture is ultimately a value of the left. And so people who love cancel culture, who call themselves conservatives, I think are being incredibly inconsistent, because true conservatives conserve truth, and one of the true things that we need to be conserving in our culture is freedom. And that's not the freedom to sin, but it is the freedom to, follow your conscience and to not oppress people just for doing things that you disagree with. Anyway, so one of the first, this is semi-theological, but one of the first main pieces of advice that I have been thinking through and that I have recognized is probably a valuable thing to do in order to make ourselves privately uncancelable is to take an inventory of the idols in our lives. Hopefully we have none, but of course we're going to have some things that we value more than we should. And ultimately these things are sinful things, they're bad things. But we're all going to have idols. And because we all have idols, I think some of us might have the temptation to be like, well, everybody has idols, and so I'm not going to worry about mine. But that's exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. This is the splinter in the log situation again. We should consider what the idols are in our lives, and we should also consider that most people aren't aware of what their idols are. And so I think I've come up with a couple of at least considerations for you. These are things that have helped me kind of reflect on things that I value maybe too much or have valued too much. But consider things that get in the way regularly of what you're supposed to do. It could be in relationships, or it could be with productivity. It could be a lot of things. So if something regularly gets in the way or hinders you in doing something that you're supposed to do, that is a very reasonable sign that that thing is an idol. And we can't be indestructible if we have idols. We are easily cancelable if we are worshiping things that are not God. Because eventually those idols are going to be torn down, because that's what God does to idols. He tears them down, or they're going to consume you. Guaranteed. One or the other is going to happen. And so the sooner you deal with these, the better. Whatever this idol is, it could be phones, it could be entertainment, it could be anything. It could be like anger. It could be a certain view of a certain thing you have. Here's an example. I went to a health freedom conference back in, I think it was probably 2020, either 2020 or 21. It was probably 20. And there were, everybody wanted health freedom. It was like an anti-COVID conference. It was educating people about things like vaccines and other, just in general, health related things. And everybody was rallying for health freedom. And it was interesting seeing that we were unified. There were so many people of different worldviews that were unified under this common goal of health freedom. We want health freedom. And then sometimes you would have a conversation with somebody and like we have this big unifying factor, but there might be small things. And I'm just going to make this up because I can't think of a particular example, but let's say somebody believed in New Age crystal healing and another person was like, I'm going to stay away from that stuff. That's bad. You can imagine the kind of person who would say, whoa, hey, that's a really important thing. You have to believe in crystal healing. A more realistic example is plenty of people I know personally have lost friendships, lost relationships over just vocally disagreeing with mRNA vaccines, right? So it's absolutely a thing. That is the kind of thing that I think can become an idol. Even people who I think are right. There are people who are like, full on for them, and there are people who are full on against them. But I think rightly we can be against certain kinds of government tyranny or untested technology or whatever, and be reasonable about it and allow other people, if their consciences are leading them in a certain direction, we can give them evidence and we can give them reasons maybe not to do things. But to define a relationship over something so secondary I would call that an idol, even though I am very strongly on one side of this, right? But I'm not going to let that separate my family or my close friends. I have friends who disagree with me about these things, and I don't see it as a big deal, and they don't either, because they're good friends. And so we should see, like, if we have some kind of strong enough opinion about something that is secondary or tertiary or even farther down the line, that will cause us, if somebody disagrees, like, I don't like the same sports team you do. If that's the kind of thing that will destroy a relationship, you might have an idol, or whoever's doing this, hopefully. There are people who actually viscerally, angrily respond if you don't like their sports team. People get into fights at sports stadiums if somebody is wearing the wrong t-shirt in the wrong section. So, of course, people can have really stupid idols and things that can just hinder them in life. If that's the kind of character that you have, where there is some section of your life that you have where that is your reaction to a certain thing, that is going to bleed, even though you think it's compartmentalized in, say, sports or health or vaccines or, whatever it is. If you think those things are compartmentalized, they're certainly not. That feeds in to your whole worldview, and that is going to have ripple effects in the rest of your character. And if you fix that one thing, that is also going to heal some of the cracks in the rest of your worldview. Every single idol that you destroy, that you get rid of, I think is going to help you become it's going to get rid of your cracks. Things are going to be less likely to get into your worldview, to tear it apart, get into your soul, and then rip it apart. So that's a really serious way, I think, to protect ourselves. The other way is, ask yourself this, I can ask myself this too, have you had very many problems interpersonally or in relationships in the past, or with different groups of people or organizations, whatever? Have you had some kind of common thread of negative interpersonal experience? And if so, like, for example, have you consistently had the same kind of issue in multiple different situations? And if so, well, you're the common denominator in those situations. And it is entirely possible. It's not guaranteed, but it's entirely possible that also reveals some kind of issue with your character. I've thought about this myself in various ways. And it's possible that you're actually the one that's right. But if something happens enough, you have to really seriously consider, like, there are the people who say, I knew a guy at one point who, he just could not get a girlfriend. He absolutely could not. And that led him down this really dark path. And actually, a lot of people are going down this same dark path. It seems to be a trendy dark path for people to go down. But because he couldn't get a girlfriend, there were obvious issues with this poor guy that everybody around him could see, but he either couldn't see it or refused to see it himself. But he started blaming women. He started blaming all women. I can't get a girlfriend. I'm a good guy. I'm a Christian. I'm a, whatever. I have a job. I have an income. I'm perfect. It must be the women's fault. They don't like true masculine men. They don't, whatever. They don't appreciate the things that they should appreciate. They don't have the right values. And so he started blaming all women. It went to the point where he thought marriage itself was bad. Marriage was a scam. As a professing Christian, this guy held the view, started following people on YouTube, that actually taught that marriage is a scam that the government wants you to get into in order to control you and oppress you, which is insane. We can't let the government have marriage. Marriage is a gift from God. Women are also a gift from God. And if you're a woman, men are a gift from God. You can't say this thing, this huge category of thing that God made, is evil. This massively important, necessary institution that God made is evil. And so in this way, this guy was dealing with an idol on his hands, and it was revealed, obviously, at least to everybody else but himself, and don't you be one of those people, that because he had so many bad experiences with women, he was actually the common denominator, and he refused to see if that it was actually his fault. Now, you might be in a situation where this happened back in 2020. This was one of the things that I personally wrestled with. I went to a number of churches trying to find a good church in my area because they're hard to find. They're still to this day hard to find. But I just kept going to churches that appeared to capitulate a little more than I wanted, that I was comfortable with, to wokeness. And sometimes it took a while to discern that because, you have to go to a church for a few months at least to actually build friendships and see what they're all about and culturally see what they are. And then I realized all these churches, man, they're woke. And so then I thought, is the problem with me? And in that situation, I legitimately think the problem was not with me. So I wanted to just give you two different examples, one on where the problem is actually you if you're the common denominator, but it doesn't have to be you. It isn't necessarily you. It could really be the things you're interacting with. But, however, I'll put this caveat on it. If you get to the point where you say all women are bad, because I've encountered a lot of these women who maybe are legitimately not good, they're woke or they're feminist or, name it. Those people do exist, but that does not make all women bad. It does not make marriage as an institution bad. If you have some bad experiences at churches, what you don't want to do is start saying something like, well, church is bad. So if that is the conclusion that you're leaping to, that 100% is something that you need to stop. That is a problem with you, not the problem with this institution that God has created, church. There are very few good churches out there in the world, I think. I'm convinced of that. But there are good churches out there. And so you can't say, I've had bad experiences at 3 churches, and so therefore church is bad. I'm just going to abandon the whole thing, and that's what a faithful Christian would do. Nope, can't do that. So take an inventory of these things that are causing you interpersonal issues in life or things that get you emotionally riled up, and be aware of what those things are and try to fix them, because the vast majority of times it is a problem with you. Especially if it's something that personally riles you up. Normal people have total control over their temper, or you should. And there are definitely things that we should get angry about. But attacking your sports team or saying that somebody wants to vaccinate somebody or themselves a certain way, those aren't reasons to completely lose your cool. So if something gets you riled up, if something makes you lose your cool, if something makes you want to devolve into calling somebody names or break off a friendship, then that is highly likely just a problem with you that you need to fix. So that was the kind of the biggest theologically kind of thing that I wanted to discuss. The rest of these things are highly practical about making yourself an indestructible person. The next thing that you need to consider after you have taken inventory, and really not after, but I mean, you can do this all the time, but it's a lot easier if you have taken care of the obvious idols in your life. The second thing is always tell the truth. At least don't lie. This is from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. Always tell the truth, or at least don't lie. I think that is a wonderful piece of advice. And if you don't like that, you can just look at the 10 Commandments. Do not lie. Lying is bad. Always focus on the truth. Always be a seeker of truth. We should want to be the kinds of people that care about truth. And if we care about truth, if something, at least in my experience, this is what I've seen throughout my life. When I was younger, I was a lot more dogmatic and in the negative way of defining the word. And because I didn't have good reasons for the things that I believed. And so whenever in government school, because I went to government school, whenever I started encountering disagreements with my beliefs for the very first time, I would get frustrated. I would get angry, that kind of angry feeling that I talked about with the first thing that we should consider. And I realized that what I believed was true about God. I grew up a Christian. I always believed in God. But it seemed like maybe part of me was interested in kind of shutting myself off from opposing viewpoints. But if what you believe is actually true, truth is not, there's no competition between truth and lies in the real world. Truth wins, always, because there is evidence for truth, because truth fits into reality, the way the world actually works. And so if you are confronted with some kind of opposition to your beliefs, and that gets you upset, that gets you riled up. And again, I think there are appropriate times to be angry. There are appropriate times to be riled up. But if it's just because you are confronted with some kind of opposing viewpoint, and we see this all the time, especially on the internet, especially if you're on X, or if you see controversial posts from people on Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media platform you're on, you will see people immediately jumping to name calling. I think this is a huge, obvious sign that a person does not actually care about truth, even if they're right, even if what they believe about that certain thing is correct. If a person is so, I'll use the word triggered, because this is how the leftist keyboard warriors act. If a person is so triggered by somebody else's worldview that they devolve into name calling and just completely lose their temper, then that's not a good thing. Then that means they inherently believe that truth is not more powerful than lies. Or they don't have good reasons for the things that they believe, and they just want to dogmatically believe it. This definitely happens with people who believe things that aren't true. It's almost impossible these days to have anything resembling a reasonable conversation with somebody who takes the wrong position on some kind of culturally significant issue. It's almost impossible. It can't be done. I've asked numerous people that I've gotten into discussions with, if you can call them discussions. They usually never progress past me asking this question, but I would ask them, if they accuse me of something, do you have an example of that? Being calm and cool, do you have an example of me doing this? Or if somebody disagrees with something, I say, okay, present me with some evidence. Let's have a discussion about this. And people are far more interested in just throwing out the things that they believe than actually supporting them, which kind of tells me that maybe they don't know how to support what they believe. Or maybe they don't actually have any support for what they believe at all. So for us, we need to be sure to not be like that kind of person. We need to be the kind of person that actually does believe what we're saying is true, but that's easy because everybody believes what they say is true. But we really do have to believe what we say is true, which, I mean, some people don't do that. That is hard for some people. Some people just have no commitment to the things they say at all. But one, we need to be committed to the things we say. We need to always tell the truth. And we have to actually have reasons, good reasons, for why we believe the things that we believe. So we always tell the truth, we don't lie, and we have good reasons for the things that we believe. And what this also does is if you only say things that you believe are true, you can never get caught in a lie. Ever. Now, let's say you said something in the past that you thought was true at the time, and then somebody calls you out for it. Your mind has changed. Admit it. It's the easiest thing in the world to say, oh yeah, I was being silly. I believed all kinds of silly things in the past. All of us did. And so it's not surprising when people actually believe something different and they've changed their mind on something. It's not really a big deal. So if that's you, you don't have to be beholden to every single thing you've said in the past if you've changed your mind. Just be willing to admit it. It's not that hard. Which brings me to the next point. If you're wrong, seriously, these are steps for being an indestructible person, not only on social media. That's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in real life. Always tell the truth. If you're at work, always tell the truth. That doesn't mean you have to show your cards about every single thing you believe. But if you are truthful, if you are sincere, if your behavior reflects the things you actually believe, and if you have good reasons for the things that you believe, you're going to be a lot harder to offend. You're going to have a lot better of a job, and you're going to be able to do a lot better at your job. Could also apply to family life at home. Always tell the truth to your kids. Always tell the truth to your spouse. And if, I think there's this masculine tendency to, and really it's not masculine at all. It's the opposite of masculine. I think this tendency is effeminate. But there's this tendency in men to want to save face. And so if they're ever confronted, even by their wives or by anybody, it's like if you're in some kind of position of power, there's this expectation that some people have that those people in that high position of power can't be confronted. They're not allowed to be confronted because you can't confront the boss, whatever. And so some people have this tendency, and this is something that I think all men probably wrestle with, to apply that to yourself and be like, whoa, did you just contradict me? And that's not good. And that tendency is actually not masculine. This craving authority, this idea, if you hear about situations like this where men are with their wives and they just want to domineer them, and they want to say, you can't disagree with me in public. You were like, biblically, wives are supposed to respect their husbands, right? But enforcing that respect, demanding that respect, not enforcing, I think enforcing can be done righteously. Enforcing can be done well, but forcing that respect through like demanding no disagreement whatsoever, or various other things, that means that we are actually afraid of being confronted. That means that we're afraid of opposing viewpoints. It means that we're not sure that what we're doing is actually right or true. And again, it goes back to the not necessarily having good reasons to do the things that you do. Now, again, there are caveats to all these things. There are definitely ways that a wife can confront her husband incorrectly. There are ways that a husband can confront his wife incorrectly. So we need to be doing everything in peace and love and charity. But I just wanted to kind of highlight this fact that it's okay to apologize. It's okay to admit you're wrong or to change your mind, because that takes actually a lot more courage than doubling down on something stupid that you did or said. That's the masculine thing to do. And if you do that, let's say somebody confronts you, if this happens online or if it happens at work or at home or anything, and you double down on something, that is going to not only damage trust with that person, but they're going to watch you. And if they see more inconsistencies in the future, that's just going to lead to more and more gaps in this relationship. Especially this happens online all the time because everything's public. People can just take screenshots. It doesn't matter if you delete stuff. So if you only say things that you believe are true, then and then don't just randomly delete stuff if you are ashamed of something you said in the past, just apologize for it. If somebody catches you on something, apologize for it. And then don't be ashamed of the things you say, because you should only be saying true things. And then if you do something stupid, don't be afraid to apologize for it. It's not a big deal. Along the same lines, another very easy piece of advice to follow: don't be a hypocrite. All of these things I think are interconnected. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't say one thing and do the other. Don't say that you believe a certain thing and then do exactly the other thing behind the curtains. Don't say online, don't present some kind of character online unless you literally are an actor or you have some kind of presence where you're putting on some kind of character. I don't do that, by the way. I think dealing with me on my podcast is hopefully exactly like dealing with me in person. You just get to hear me talk a lot more on my podcast. I try to do a lot more listening whenever I talk to people in person. So that's really the only difference you're going to get with me. My personality, my persona, the things I post online, everything hopefully is going to be exactly the same as when you see me in person. And so if a person preaches a certain thing or acts a certain way publicly, and then they are totally the opposite in private, that's hypocrisy. to say, well, this is bad, or I don't like this, and then you secretly do. What that says is you probably want people's attention, or probably that's it. I've personally seen examples of this recently online where things have been exposed from little micro celebrity pastors or whatever, where they're preaching one thing, they're saying one thing, and then they're doing exactly the opposite in private. Stuff like this is at the root of any kind of pastor scandal. That's why pastors get so much in trouble and receive so much pushback whenever there's some kind of sex scandal, because they should be held to a higher standard. And they probably have spent years preaching people to be held to a higher standard, and then they are not themselves. That's why God disqualifies pastors who are hypocrites. That's why we're not allowed to be hypocrites to be a pastor. You can't do that. Now, can people slip up? I guess it depends on what the slip up is. But the point is, because we're human beings, we're not going to live perfectly consistently. But we can actively try to not be a hypocrite. And that's one way to become an uncancelable, indestructible person in public and in private. The next thing, here's an interesting one, and I'm not really sure how to develop this or how a person can develop this in their own lives. But the tip is have a good sense of humor, which, at least for me, is revealed if somebody laughs or smiles a lot. If somebody laughs or smiles a lot, that's a sign that they have a good sense of humor. In your own life, think about how much you smile or laugh or are joyful generally through the day, even when something bad happens. So at least for me, I often find myself laughing. Like, I get pushback for some reason. Here's a fun fact. For some reason, my name, I am a boogeyman among the communities that followed certain disqualified pastors, and among people who love tyranny and this kind of thing, because I talk about this a lot on my podcast. And so these groups that I am speaking out against, or these groups that associate with these people who associate with these groups, who like these ideas, for some reason, my stuff gets shared around in those groups. And I hear, and yes, I know that they do this, my name appears, they talk about me behind the scenes. And I'm not actually upset by this. I'm kind of flattered that I have this infamy in these dark, stupid, evil circles. Like, awesome. I want them to be afraid of me. That's good. But, and so that means the anonymous minions, they come and they call me fat, which is hilarious because I'm not fat. I have a relatively low body fat percentage. I don't quite have a visible six-pack, but I'm working on it. I go to the gym 5 days a week. I swim. I can jump high. I'm fast. I run. I do cardio. So it's really funny. It makes me laugh tremendously when somebody's like, "You're fat." Somebody today said, "You're fat and middle-aged and you're not aging," whatever. So like, I'm 33 years old. So the point is, when adversity comes at you, we should be able, sometimes, not all the time, maybe, because again, there's a time and a place to get angry and to push back, I guess. But most of the time, when I receive things like that, when I hear that things like that are happening, when like, "Ooh, these people are talking about you at their conference," that makes me happy. That means what I'm doing is effective. It means what I'm doing is working. It means the righteousness is infecting the evil, and it's making them mad. So I love it. And so in that way, I am defended against this kind of offense that I could be taking constantly, all the time, because I am the woke right boogeyman. I am hated and feared in woke right communities. And back a long time ago, there were, back when other issues were prevalent culturally, I was hated in other groups, right? Anyway, You could just look through the history of my podcasts and guess who all have called me bad names in the past based on things that, just public true things that I've said, just noticing things, calling out things that happen and drawing conclusions about those things. It's not hard. So anyway, but this proves that, the people I'm up against, they don't care about truth because they're reacting in the way that I told you that was bad to react, right? So a sense of humor is very good to have, because no matter what it is, and again, I'm not just talking about online things, but if you're working or if you're at just any kind of thing where you're dealing with other people, or just in general, even if you're not dealing with other people, I guess, you could encounter some kind of adversity. Adversity will come at you. Bad things will happen to you, guaranteed. And it helps to be able to have a good sense of humor about those bad things. And I think we can have a good sense of humor about those things, because if we realize that there is a bigger picture going on, if you are just trucking along with life, if you are being righteous, if you're doing good stuff, and adversity comes at you, that's actually a sign that what you're doing is effective, which is funny. Satan hates to be mocked. And so when Satan tries to come at you with evil things and you see it exactly for what it is, then it's funny. It's funny when you can imagine the cartoons where there's the huge boxer and then the little tiny shrimp at the bottom who's punching his hardest, and it's not even, hurting the guy's leg. That is the kind of response that we should have to much of the adversity in our life. It should just be laughing at it. The Bible says God sits in the heavens and laughs in response to the unrighteousness of the people on earth, right? And so if we want to be Christ-like, if we want to be like God, we should also laugh at the adversity that is thrown at us when we are being righteous. Another thing, we have promises of blessings, like blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's actually a good and beautiful thing if you're being righteous, if you're actually being a good guy, because, of course, there can be a tendency if you're being evil to say, look at all this. This is another common thing that you see happening. Look at all these people who are criticizing me. That means I'm doing the right thing. That's not what that means at all. The key issue, first and foremost, remember I said, love God, hate sin. If you're actually loving God, if you're actually spending time in the Word, if you're actually living in alignment to the Word of God, and if you actually hate sin, actual sin, not just things you disagree with, but actual real-life sin, then that means the opposition that comes up against you, if it's other people disagreeing with you, or if it's things at work where you have to take a stand for something you believe at a certain point, or a difference in ideology between anybody you meet. When you see that kind of adversity coming at you, you can have total confidence that you're actually doing the right thing and that this is actually a blessing and that you'll be blessed for it, which will allow you to have a much better sense of humor in these situations. Another thing that I think helps is postmillennialism, talking about eschatology. I know not everybody who listens to the podcast is a postmillennial, but after I became a postmillennial, I also became a lot more optimistic, not only about the future, but about the present, because that means the things that I'm doing presently actually are contributing to a better future. It also means that the evil that is happening presently is going to be short-lived, and it's going to go away. And so all of the striving that evil people do is not going to last long, and that makes me laugh, because it's funny. Because it's funny to see evil people try to do things that is ultimately not going to be effective at all. Again, tying into this is with eschatology, postmillennialism, or just having a good sense of humor, is seeing the broader story play out. If you're being faithful in your job or being faithful at home, and the key is being faithful, or being faithful calling out darkness online, or whatever it is, and you get opposition, if you can zoom out and see the whole forest, you would see, okay, of course that's what's going to happen. Or if you It also actually allows you to see your mistakes. So like, let's say something bad happens to you in life, some kind of financial bad thing happens, and you zoom out, you could say, oh, that was actually probably caused by some bad decision that I made 6 months ago, or I was, eating out too much at restaurants, and that's why I don't have enough money now to do this other thing I want. Or because I had this lack of self-control in this area, I racked up my credit card debt too much, and now it's going to be harder for me to pay it off this month. Something like that. So being able to see and consider the broader picture, to look outside yourself at that moment, actually allows you to see to see the consequences of things that are probably going to happen, and see the causes of things that are currently happening that will help you play your part in that story better. Hopefully that makes sense. The other thing is, and this is kind of wrapping back to the theology part of it, is it's very important to find a good church. It's super important to find a good church, specifically where. Not so. There was a church that I went to before that was like kind of woke-ish, and after I left, they became far more woke than that, and so my concerns were sadly affirmed. But something I noticed in the church is that people were really afraid to disagree, and people were so like, for example, it was a rather politically diverse church, and when the vaccine stuff was happening, the conversations about that stuff would just be shut down, which is bad, right? Like, we should be able to work these things out with our family, with our brothers and sisters in Christ. And so even if we have disagreeing opinions, we should be able to talk. We should be able to have reasonable conversations about these things. And at this church in particular, they had the kind of culture where these things could not be talked about, where disagreement could not happen. And so what I'm telling you is, because a church is one of the most important things that we can have for our spiritual health, because God commands us to not neglect to gather for various reasons. Because God commands us to worship every week on Sundays. That's why we hopefully have a call to worship in our service. But find yourself a church where you can, and where people actually do, disagree with each other peacefully on secondary issues. But also, that same church should be able to divide sharply on the issues that really matter. And again, those churches are very few and far between, but that is a massive key to making you an indestructible person. If you not only are yourself anti-fragile, but if you are surrounded by a community of people, of like-minded people who are also anti-fragile, who are willing to disagree, who understand the doctrine of conscience, that people are actually allowed to disagree on certain secondary issues, and you don't have to divide with them over that. That is a beautiful, beautiful community to have. And then finally, just like church, you should also find yourself a job. And I recognize that not every one of the practical things on my list is possible for everybody, especially the church and the job thing, because it's really hard to find these. But this is something I think we should always be keeping our eye out for. Find yourself a job where the boss has your back, where if you are being righteous, if you're doing the right thing, if you have these certain Christian beliefs, ideally it would be a Christian boss who agrees with you biblically on things, but it doesn't have to be necessarily. It could be a boss that really doesn't care what you believe, and that would be a faithful situation. But if you're doxxed, if somebody is like, tries to get you in trouble, if somebody shows up and to whatever situation you're in your job, and somebody gets the picture in their head that, oh, this guy is an LGBT affirming. Whoa. Find yourself a job where your boss will not care and will also defend you for it. That is a huge thing to have. If your livelihood comes from a person who actually cares about you and has your back and is willing to disagree with you on things, that's a wonderful thing. Even better than that, though, is even more anti-fragile, is to have your own business. If possible, I think we should have multiple income streams or even own our own business so that we can never lose our job. And this doesn't only apply to controversies that occur, but there could be like a dip in business and you could be laid off. I was laid off from a job before. There was another job that I worked at where it was in 2020 where I specifically quit my job because they were going to enforce the vaccine mandates and for employees, and everybody was supposed to get vaccinated, and I didn't want to do that, and so I quit. So you need to be the kind of person who's willing to quit a job like that and be able to stand for the things that you believe. But also, it's even better if you find a job that will stand up for those things for you, right? And if you own your own business, that's even better. But of course, the thing is with owning your own business, then that means you might have to make cutbacks on yourself. And so there's a level of security that not everybody might be willing to, or a level of risk that not everybody might be willing to take upon themselves. So I own my own business and I love it. It's great, but it's definitely not for everybody. But I think more people, especially more Christians, should be business owners. So then we can help build a Christian economy and support other Christian business owners. And then also another thing is, if you have that strong church and if you have this faithfulness in your own personal life and you have your own business, then hopefully, ideally, if you are in a church where you are surrounded by like-minded, similarly anti-fragile people, then they are also going to own their own business, and you will be able to support each other. You'll be able to use each other's services, and you will be able to provide your goods for other church members. And then you will be contributing to your own economy in church. And that's truly a beautiful thing. So all of these things, it's not an extensive, or it's not a complete list. Those are just some things that I was kind of mulling over about how to be an anti-fragile, uncancelable person, kind of emotionally and spiritually and physically. Those are some good things to think about. If you have maybe any other valuable insights to this, feel free to leave a comment or message me on one of my social media platforms. And I got a new patron subscriber recently, so thank you for subscribing. Please feel free, if you're a subscriber or you want to subscribe, you can give me ideas for episodes. You can send me things on Patreon. I would love to be able to talk about the things that my patrons want me to talk about. So thanks so much for supporting the show. It's kind of a plug for Patreon. If you also want to support the show and help keep it running and help me to be even more of a prolific boogeyman for the evils and tyrannies in the world, feel free to support the show. Or at very least, it would be helpful if you give me a subscribe or share it on whatever platform you like to listen to. And I will catch you next time. God bless.